All right, sorry about that. Hopefully you guys are back. I don't see Facebook for some reason. Let me try to get Facebook back on. Let's see. Nice, Facebook stopped. All right. Well, anyway, we'll manage without Facebook. Sorry about that, guys. I thought that was kind of one of my computer problems that had gone away. Hadn't had that happen in a long time. Computer just froze. Everything just collapsed and went away. Anyway, I think I did my rant on sports and Michael Jordan and the difference between it and the rest of the world. And it's great to watch sport. It's great to see great athletes execute guilt-free and be as successful as they are without the culture going after them and without the culture, going after them like they do businessmen. So the sport is the one realm in which you can go and you can root for the good guys. You can root for your team. You can embrace your team fully. You can see excellent with no guilt, and you can see people, achieving excellence without feeling guilty themselves, without humility, and with lots of pride. So that's what I love about sports. That's why I like to see it. Right? So what I want to do now is I'll open it up to some Super Chat questions. We'll see if you have questions. If we don't, then we'll call it a night. I have two. One asked me about Jerry Krause. Jerry Krause was the general manager of the Bulls. I think Jerry Krause was obviously a very competent general manager. He built a team around Jordan that was an excellent team that succeeded and won 6 championships. But he seems to be a guy with a real inferiority complex and real self-esteem problem. So that he couldn't handle the fact that Jordan and the basketball players were getting all the attention. And he wanted to get the attention. And I think he kind of, and he didn't like that the coach was getting an attention. He wasn't getting. So he kind of blew up in the end. And that's what happens when you have people who have low self-esteem running things, is that they can't stick with it. They can't handle it. And ultimately they become self-destructive and they destroy everybody around him. So I think it's sad what happened to Jerry Krause. It's sad what happened to the Bulls because of Jerry Krause. But he basically forced the Bulls to break up because he resented the success, the focus that the success had brought to the players and to the coach rather than to himself. But he was probably a very good executive. All right. Let's see. Hey, Yaron. After a year of working after college, I decided I want to get a master's degree. I love economics and politics, but mostly philosophy and ideas. I'm thinking about public policy to bolster free market ideas, thoughts. That's great. We need intellectuals. We need people who have ability to teach and to write, and you got to love teaching and writing if you want to be an intellectual. So I'm excited by anybody who wants to pursue that career. I think it can be a very rewarding career, not financially, but spiritually, and in terms of the level of challenge and fun and interest and the people you meet and so on. It's a fabulous career. So I would definitely go for it. I try to get into a good school. I try to get into a combination of a good school with some good teachers, some good professors. If you're going to go into philosophy, you might today consider going to the University of Texas in Austin, where we'll soon have 2 objectivist philosophers. If you want to study political theory, I'm not sure exactly where to go. I don't have particular advice, but you might want to ask people like Bradley Thompson, who's been on the show, who's a political scientist, where the best schools are to study political philosophy. And public policy. But if you want to study economics, then somewhere like George Mason is probably best, where you get the best kind of Austrian economics, or Chicago if you want a more rigorous mathematical approach to economics. But so depending on exactly what you want to do, there are a lot of decent schools out there where you can get an education and hopefully get a job afterwards and join the fight. It's great. What are my thoughts on Dennis Rodman? I mean, I don't like Dennis Rodman. I never liked him. I hated the Detroit Pistons. I hated that kind of basketball, which was really, really physical and really, really rough. I like the beautiful passing game of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, the fast pace of the Lakers, the thoughtful half-court offense of the Celtics, and of course the amazing basketball played by Magic and by Jordan. But I thought the Pistons were just kind of thugs on the court, and Dennis represented that. Now, he was a great rebounder and he was a smart player, but he just strikes me as, when you see him, when you see his attitude to life and everything else, I don't like him. I don't like anything about him except that he was a great rebounder and a great defender, and he played with Jordan. So, not a fan of Dennis's, and not a fan of people who tattoo their bodies and put rings all over their face and all this stuff. I find it very unappealing. I find it ugly, and I, particularly when it's random and it's everywhere, and it's just an expression of something, I think, off. So I'm not a fan of Dennis and everything he in a sense represents. Let's see. Inspired by We the Living performance at Ocon, how does the dictatorship reward the worst people and punish the best? I'm not sure what you mean by how. A dictatorship has to do that because the best basically are the free thinkers. The best are the people who can think for themselves. And that's exactly the kind of people a dictatorship cannot tolerate. That is exactly the kind of people that an authoritarian regime must exclude, because they challenge the very existence of authoritarianism, the very existence of an authority, the very existence of somebody in a position to command you, somebody in a position to tell you what you can and cannot do and how you can and cannot think. So they must, therefore, punish the good, punish the best, punish the thoughtful, punish the free, independent thinkers, and cultivate the worst, cultivate the followers, cultivate the mindless, cultivate the yes sir mentality. And that's what all authoritarians do. That's what all authoritarians do. They look for the yes people. They do not want criticism. They do not want to be challenged. They do not want to be questioned. They do not want, they do not want to be challenged. They do not want to think. They want people who don't think. And I think you see that. You see that in politicians all the time. The more authoritarian a politician, the fewer people around him are real independent thinkers. The more yes men and yes women he surrounds himself with. And I won't mention names in this case, but certainly in authoritarian regimes you can see that. And if you step out of bounds, if you criticize, if you think for yourself, then you're punished, anywhere from being exiled to being shot. All right, let's see, another basketball question. Thoughts on Pippen and his contract controversy? I mean, I think this is an example where Jerry Krause and the whole approach to management was wrong, right? Pippen signed a 7-year deal. It was clear by, the second or third year that it was way underpriced, that he should have gotten a lot more. He was unhappy, so you could argue that he never played up to his full potential because he was never completely happy playing for the Bulls. Never 100% motivated because he didn't feel like they appreciated him and didn't feel like they paid him. Now, they didn't have to renegotiate the contract because a contract's a contract. And Pippen, played well. I just wonder how good he could have been if he felt like he was really being appreciated for who and what he was. So I think it was a management mistake not to go to Pippen and say, look, we know that you're much more valuable than this. Let's renegotiate and let's come up with a new deal. And I think just from a management perspective, you would have got more out of Pippen. And I think the fans would have appreciated it. I think everybody around you would have appreciated it. So I think that would have been the better long-term management move. All right. What did Ayn Rand think about the We the Living movie, and when did she find out about its existence? She loved it. She thought it was excellent, from what I can tell. And she discovered it when it was rediscovered in the 1960s, I think it was. It was brought over from Italy, and she got to see it, and she really loved it as movie making. Some of the dialogue she thought was off in terms of not conveying the message. She actually had the subtitles, the English subtitles, reflect actually Ayn Rand's editing. So it's not exactly what they're saying. It's not an accurate translation of what the actors are saying. So she was involved during the 70s, I think, in the remake, not the remake, the cleaning up of the movie and the putting subtitles on and the re-release of the movie. So the release of the movie in the United States in the 1970s, I think it was something she supported, something she embraced, and something she was involved in, particularly on editing some of the subtitles to make them more reflective of the novel and less reflected of the, I guess the bad translation or the bad philosophical premise of the people who made the movie. But I don't know if you know the story of the movie. The story is fascinating. So the story of the movie is the movie was made in Italy, and it's a beautiful movie, and I highly, highly recommend it. Anita Valli is a great Kira. It's in black and white. It's in Italian. It was made during the war. It was made, I think, in 41 or 42 in Italy under Mussolini, and it was really made as an anti-totalitarian movie. But of course, Mussolini thought, oh no, this is just an anti-communist movie. And of course, he was a fascist, so he was like, cool, let's make an anti-communist movie. So he gave it a green light, and the movie was made, and it was made by an Italian director, and clearly it was broader than just communism, but and it was released in Italy. But before it was released, Mussolini had a copy sent to Goebbels in Germany, and Goebbels watched the movie. And he immediately, telegraphed Mussolini, what are you doing, you idiot, basically? This is an anti-totalitarianism movie. This isn't just communism. This is attacking us. And Mussolini immediately had all the copies of the movie rounded up and burnt. And one copy was hidden and survived, and that's the copy that was discovered in the 1960s and brought to Ayn Rand, and Ayn Rand got to see it. And authorized kind of its re-release. So she was never asked about the movie. She didn't know it existed. She didn't know the story, as far as I know. And she never got royalties, anything like that. But, I mean, it's a beautiful movie. So I highly, highly recommend you find it. It's available used to be available on Blu-ray and DVD. I'm not sure if it's available on Netflix or something like that, but go find it. It's a great, great movie and a great story. Does tribalism undercut honesty? Does tribalism? Yeah, I mean, of course. Tribalism has the theory of truth under tribalism is whatever the tribe believes. So tribalism undercuts facts. It undercuts reality. It undercuts truth. And the basis of honesty is truth. The most important person to be honest to is yourself. The virtue of honesty and objectivism is not about lying or not lying to other people. It's about a commitment to reality, a commitment to the facts, a commitment to truth. And yet, if the tribe is supreme, then truth is not supreme. See, in objectivism, truth is supreme. Reality is supreme. What is supreme. But for tribalism, it isn't. For tribalism, it's whatever the tribe wants, whatever the tribe believes, whatever the tribe upholds. That is what is supreme. That is the standard for everything. So truth, honesty, reason, rationality is out the window. Tribalism is a primitive form of collectivism. It's such an unsophisticated form of collectivism that, it's not just everybody, that you have to maximize everybody's well-being. We're only going to maximize the well-being of the people who look like me, who belong to my tribe, to my little group, to my subgroup within. And Ayn Rand hated tribalism and denounced tribalism, and it's anti-everything she believed in. It's anti her metaphysics, her epistemology, her ethics, and her politics. So absolutely, tribalism undercuts honesty. It undercuts every one of the virtues. Every single one of them. My thoughts on economist John Tamny, if you're familiar. Yeah, John, I know John. We're acquainted, I wouldn't say we're friends, but I know John, I haven't seen him in years. And I follow some of his writings, and I think he's good for the most part. I don't always agree with him, and I can't remember now exactly what I disagree with him. I think on some monetary policy, maybe we disagree. But generally, I think Tamny is a very thoughtful writer, thoughtful thinker. He on economics, he's definitely a pro-free market, kind of absolutist when it comes to markets. So yeah, I'm a fan of John Tamny's, even though I don't claim to agree with him on everything, and I don't think he agrees with me on anything. And I'm not sure philosophically, we probably line up philosophically probably on 80-90%, but not all the way. And again, I don't know him well enough to tell you the extent to which what it is exactly we disagree about. But I know we do. I remember we do, even though I don't know the particulars. Let us see. Thought on spreading the importance of philosophy. I'm not sure what that means. I think it's important to spread the importance of philosophy. I think an essay like Ayn Rand's, Philosophy Who Needs It is a crucial essay. But so I think you have to spread the importance of philosophy. But I don't think you can do that free of a philosophy you want to spread. That is, I don't think you can be value-free in spreading just the importance of philosophy. I can't anyway. And I think it's while it's valuable to spread the importance of philosophy, it should be done in the context of a particular philosophy, a philosophy of life, a philosophy of reality, a philosophy for living, a philosophy of freedom and liberty and capitalism. So I think you have to do it jointly, because it's not enough to say you need guidance and philosophy provides you with guidance. Great, but then are you sending them to read Immanuel Kant? And most people read Immanuel Kant and they think philosophy is insane and crazy and drop it. So you have to do it right. You have to find a way to show people the importance of philosophy without turning them off. And at the same time, hopefully, turn them onto a rational philosophy, a right philosophy, a good philosophy. So I don't think you can separate them out. The closest you can get is Ayn Rand's Philosophy Who Needs It. But then, of course, immediately afterward, there is, and here's the philosophy, here's the ideas, here's the right ideas. Because at the end, what you're seeking is truth. Any comment on the 426 Rubin report where Michael Shermer criticizes Ayn Rand objectivism for kicking people out for liking wrong music and wrong cigarettes? Give me a break. I like Michael Shermer sometimes, and I guess we're friendly when we meet, but this is bullshit, and it's nonsense, and it's childish, and it's he should know better, and it's amateur. It's amateur hour. You don't like objectivism, you don't like Ayn Rand, then criticize the ideas. You like some of it, you don't like other stuff, criticize the ideas. Come on, bring it on. Bring on a rebuttal. Bring on a critique. But this is just bullshit. Kicking out people, why is that a problem? There's some people I don't like. I don't want them in my house. I don't want them in my movement. I don't want them in my organization. Why is kicking out people a bad thing? Does Michael Shermer willing to partner and cooperate with anybody? If his partner, for example, committed fraud, would he kick him out of the business? Yeah, of course you would. Then why kicking people out, irrespective of why they are kicked out, irrespective of the reason? If it's an intellectual movement and somebody completely botches the ideas, or completely undercuts the ideas, or subverts the ideas, should they be kicked out? Yeah, of course they should be. Why would I associate, like any business? If I have a business partner and we now have completely different strategies, completely different goals, completely different ideas, should we separate? Absolutely, we should separate. There's no virtue in staying together no matter what. So, kicking people out is virtuous under the right circumstance. It has to be rational. It has to be good reason. And again, if there's a particular case where somebody was kicked out and you don't like it, Michael Shermer, let's debate it. Let's discuss why they were kicked out and what it even means to be kicked out. But they're people I don't like. And I don't want to be in the same corporation with them. I don't want to be in the same intellectual. And this is not, what's so unique about objectivism? Public choice theory was founded by two guys who ultimately despised each other and didn't talk to one another for 30 years, didn't cite one another in their papers. That's public choice. Libertarians hate each other's guts, constantly are fighting. Neoconservatives? Really? I mean, show me one intellectual movement that doesn't, quote, kick people out, doesn't have disagreements, doesn't have fights, doesn't have people not speaking to each other, doesn't have groups that separate out, that have their own journals, that write for themselves and won't publish the other side. I mean, this is intellectual life. People who take ideas seriously. They fight. Big deal. Grow up. I mean, it's only people sheltered within some kind of cloister that are not engaged in the real world where you don't fight. And then kicked out for liking the wrong music. I mean, that is such a cliche and that is simply untrue. Nobody is being kicked out for liking the wrong music. Kicked out of what? Kicked out of where? Just because of the music? There was nothing else going on? There were no other issues? And this wrong cigarette? Really? I've never even heard that one, and I've been around objectivists for 40 years. Is that true? Yeah. Well, objectivists, maybe for less than 40 years, but I've been studying Ayn Rand's ideas for 40. I first read Ayn Rand in 1977. That's 43 years ago. And I've never heard even a rumor of somebody being kicked out for liking the wrong cigarette. So stop it, people. Stop it. You don't like Ayn Rand? That's fine. As I said, arguments are great. There's no problem with arguing. But don't make up stuff. Don't trivialize. Bring on the ideas. Bring on the critique. What's wrong with her metaphysics? What's wrong with her epistemology? What is it about her definition of reason don't you like? What is it about her theory of concept formation do you find flawed? Do you think rational self-interest makes sense? Which one of the virtues do you disagree with? What about capitalism? God, I mean, she wrote hundreds of articles with deep thought of a caliber that, with all due respect to Michael Shermer, he doesn't come close to. She wrote two best-selling novels that have lived way past her lifetime as classic novels for Americans to read. And yet all you can critique about her is she kicked out some people. I mean, luckily I don't swear, because I would now. I mean, Michael Shermer is supposed to be a thinker. He's supposed to be an intellectual. So we want to know, Michael, in detail, in the same detail that Ayn Rand wrote about, we want to know. What was she wrong about? what were the problems in objectivism in her philosophy? It's so, I don't want to say anything more because Michael Shermer won't speak to me. Not that that's a bad thing, I guess, but because, hey, I believe in, he might kick me out. Will he kick me out? What debate between me and Michael Shermer would he host? To talk about whether people were kicked out because of cigarettes? I mean, that would be an insult to debates. I mean, it's ridiculous to debate these things. These people are unserious. You want to debate philosophy, then let's debate philosophy. But put this stuff to the side. Get rid of it. Yeah, I mean, his books are good. I like Michael Shermer for the most part. But then he descends into some, I don't know what it is. He has a whole chapter in one of his books on Ayn Rand, on objectivism as a cult. It's a cult. And he can't escape that. And he won't engage. So, screw him. Thoughts on mandatory COVID vaccines. I mean, I'm against mandatory COVID vaccines. Why would anybody be for mandatory COVID vaccines? I mean, you don't want to be vaccinated against COVID, don't get sick, and so on. It would be even better if you actually paid for your own healthcare expenses and didn't rely on the government to subsidize them and to pay for them, as Medicare and so many people do, rely on Medicare and Medicaid, and then so you would bear the cost of the fact that you didn't get vaccinated and get sick. But no, I mean, there's zero reason why you would have to have mandatory COVID vaccines. It doesn't make any sense. If people don't want to get COVID and die, then they get COVID and die. And as long as they have insurance to pay for their hospital bills, I don't care. And if they don't have insurance to pay for their hospital bills, then they rely on charity or they don't get treated. I mean, in my world, in this world, they get treated off the backs of taxpayers, but so be it. I mean, there are worse things, I guess, that are being paid off of the backs of taxpayers. But no, I don't believe in mandatory vaccines. There's probably certain circumstances where mandatory vaccines might be necessary, but certainly what we have, COVID, is not such an example. Have you read Theory of Justice by John Rawls? I've tried, I really have, but I can't get through it. So I read secondary sources. I haven't read the actual book. I actually have read sections of it, right? And I read people writing about it, anywhere from John Tomasi where's John Tomasi? At Brown University, to Ayn Rand, who wrote a critique of Theory of Justice. A whole essay criticizing a theory of justice. And without reading the book, based on my understanding of what he is saying in the theory of justice, it is the most evil crap that I can imagine. It's complete nonsense. It's this idea of the veil of ignorance and starting from a veil of ignorance, and then, I mean, that to me is complete science fiction and makes no sense. And is not the right way to approach philosophy. You don't start philosophy with fantasy. You start philosophy with reality. You don't create fantasy creatures who sit behind a veil of ignorance, but who don't have any identity and who don't know what identity they will have. That's not a way to start a philosophy, to think philosophically. So I'm not a fan of John Rawls. And everything I know about him, everything I've read about him, everything I've read by him, which is, I've gotten through some pages, everything I've read by people who admire him and people who interpret him, I do not like him one bit. And I think he's been incredibly, unbelievably influential. And even in this pandemic, I think the fact that we are not cocooning the old, the fact that we're not segregating and discriminating between the old and the young in our approach to this crisis is a consequence of the dominance of egalitarianism in our world, where we can't We can't let the young out unless it somehow improves the fate of the old. And if it doesn't improve the fate of the old, then the young and the old must be treated the same. It's not exactly what Rawls says, but that's how modern intellectuals interpret it. So you have this underlying egalitarianism that just pushes everything towards mediocrity, causes everybody to be treated the same. And other than in sports, as I mentioned earlier, rejects excellence, rejects success, rejects winning. At the end of last Sunday's live show, you called out a listener for asking about politics. I think your reply could be a standalone episode in itself. Politics is downstream from culture and philosophy. Definitely. And culture is downstream from philosophy. Most important thing is philosophy, then culture, then politics. So I'll look for that one. So the last, so I guess the question on politics on last Sunday's show, I'll look for that one. All right, I see no more Super Chat questions, so we might call it a night with a couple of short segments rather than the 3-hour shows you guys demand. I mean, you would have to get me on a rant for me to fill out the time. Here's a question. At the end of The Last of the Mohicans, the character Duncan takes the place of Daniel Day-Lewis's character to be burned to death. Was this a moral act? Wow. I mean, I can't remember, but I think the answer is yes, because he is responsible. And I can't remember in what way, I just remember that this is true. He is responsible for the Daniel Day-Lewis's character getting into the problem that he's in. And I can't remember exactly the details, but I do remember that Duncan fails, and his failure is what gets them into the mess. And he therefore recognizes his moral failings, and in a sense is the movie that punishes him for it. He recognizes it, and he gives up his life rather than the hero, the person who should not be suffering, the person who does not deserve suffering should be saved. So it is a moral act in that it's a just desert. It's justice. Duncan dies because Duncan deserves to die. And he knows it because he's the one who screwed up. And again, I wish I had seen the movie more recently and could tell you exactly the sequence of events. Let's see. Jason asks, why is the alt-right so quiet now? Because they've been mainstreamed. I mean, one of the things that came out of Charlottesville is that, in a sense, the acceptance that they were okay, that the President of the United States kind of gave them a wink. But more than that, what's happened over the last 2 years is that the intelligentsia within the conservative movement, or some of it, has embraced their ideas. And I've done many shows about this. I did a show where the Claremont Review of Books actually reviewed a book, an online self-published book of somebody called Bronze Age Pervert, who is not quite alt-right, but is ultimately, is alt-right. A creep, a weirdo, a nut. And it is, the Claremont Review of Books gave it a relatively positive review and indicated real sympathy to much of the angst that the alt-right feels and some of their solutions for it. And then if you look at the conservative nationalism that I've talked about, right, the conservative nationalist movement, it very much reflects the influence of the alt-right, the kind of, ethnocentric, racist agenda is hidden in there. If you listen to some of the lectures of the conservative nationalists, they disdain for people from other cultures, not just for other cultures, but the disdain from people for other cultures, for individuals from other cultures. The focus on nationalism, which the alt-right advocated for. So all of it is in a sense being mainstream, being capitalized by these by things like Bronze Age pervert, and there's a bigger and bigger movement now within the conservative movement for more authoritarian style government, not authoritarianism, but more authoritarian style government. No respect for individual rights. Certainly an emphasis on tribalism, a big emphasis on tribalism. All of that is being mainstreamed. So all of the things that the alt-right was pushing for is being mainstreamed. Donald Trump trolls the left. They don't need to. I mean, trolls them, not critiques them. There's no critique in what Trump does. It's trolling. And everybody trolls the left now. If you look at conservative circles, if you look at online, you don't have to be an alt-right. So the alt-right, in a sense, got taken over or got won. Not in its most vulgar form, but it became part of the mainstream conservatism. So in a sense, there's no need for the alt-right. Somebody says, yes, you've said that before, Bronze Age pervert, like Pinaeus, priesthood, and I agree, it is not rational. It's not rational. The whole Bronze Age pervert it's Bronze Age. It's primitive. It's barbaric. It's the rise of the barbarians. And while it's not explicitly religious, it's mystical, and therefore opens the door up for the religious mystics. And it's Nietzschean. It's in its declaration of a superior being, Übermensch. And it's nihilistic in its solutions. So, questions are flooding in now. Where were you like 5 minutes ago, guys? All right, let's see. Let's take these in order. Somebody asked me, what was the question here? What are my thoughts on Spacejam? I think I remember it being fun. It's not a memorable movie. It's not a movie that left an impression on me. I thought it was fun, and that's all I can say about it, really. All right, let's see. There's some good questions here. Okay, at the end of last Sunday's live show, you called out a list. I read that already. Okay, I'm keeping that so I can make a segment of it. Can you talk about Helvidius, who wrote about egoism before Rand? His works are mostly in French. Did Rand know about him? Who was he? I don't know anything about Helvidius. So, sorry, I'll ask around, see if there's somebody who does know, but I don't know anything about him. I don't know if Rand knew him. She did read French. She read Hugo in French, but I don't know if she read him. I doubt that his view of egoism matched Rand's in any kind of way. I'm sure I would have heard if they had, in a sense of elevating reason, in a sense of, an epistemological sense, which is what egoism needs and must have. I would doubt it if he had it, but I'll look him up and see if I can comment on it, but I don't know him. What do you do when people don't see the difference between a principled stand and a dogmatic one? How do you explain the difference? I mean, one is rational, contextual, based on knowledge and truth. And one is just you're following a formula, you're following orders. And that's how you need to explain the difference. And your principled stand is, here's why. Here are the reasons. Here's the truth, and here's how I come to that truth. Here's the evidence. Here's what I'm suggesting. Here's why it's right. Dogma is, it's just right. I don't know exactly why it's right, because my principle tells me it's right. But if it's not dogma, then you should be able to explain what the principle means and why this is the conclusion you come to out of it. I mean, I'm sure there are deeper differences. Good question for somebody like Greg Salamieri or Ankar Gate. But that's basically one has reasons behind it and the other one doesn't. Cuomo just extended the lockdown to June 13th. I'm shocked. Completely arbitrarily. No approval from the legislature was required. Does Cuomo have de facto dictatorial powers? Is DIM happening before eyes? Yeah, although I don't think DIM is happening completely because I don't think Cuomo will continue this forever. I think he'll give it up at some point, which is not, so it's not complete dictatorship. It's temporal dictatorship. But yeah, it's absurd. I think the Wisconsin Supreme Court was absolutely right. They didn't say you couldn't do lockdowns. They said a governor can't just do lockdowns or a health secretary can't just do lockdowns without the legislature chiming in, without other branches of government chiming in, without it going through some process. Otherwise, it's dictatorial and it's arbitrary, it's random. And for Cuomo to do this is completely random. I mean, think about the fact that that upstate New York has nowhere the kind of cases in New York. Maybe New York City needs to continue the lockdown. I doubt it. And I'm against lockdowns. They might have been necessary in New York only because government failed so badly before the lockdowns. But I'm against lockdowns. And I think most epidemiologists are against lockdowns. They're not the way you deal with a pandemic. So I don't want to go into that. But yes, I think Cuomo is exercising dictatorial power. I think our executives all across the country are exercising dictatorial power. I think it's an abomination. I think it from Trump on down to every governor in the country with a few exceptions. I don't know many places that went through the legislature, that got approval, that got emergency powers, that did the things, through our system of separation of powers. And then even then, I'm not sure that a lockdown like this should be, it might be constitutional, but should be constitutional. With Trump's push for prosecutions for Obamagate, are conspiracy theories getting scarily close to going mainstream? I mean, look, we have a president who used to be the number one cheerleader of one of the dumbest conspiracy theories in human history. And I know I'm going to upset Trump fans out there, but Trump was the number one cheerleader of the birther conspiracy. The idea that Obama wasn't born in the United States, was born in, I can't remember, Kenya, Uganda, or whatever, right? Which was completely debunked, was completely ridiculous, was completely stupid. Right? But Trump, the current president of the United States, who went on shows with Alex Jones and complimented Alex Jones, a conspiracy theory complete and utter nutcase. So conspiracy theories are already mainstream. And the conspiracy theories he articulates regularly, whether it's, in some of it's around press coverage and conspiracies around that, or even about the coronavirus. So, no, they went mainstream as soon as Trump was elected, because we took somebody who believes in them and we made him president of the United States of America, which is still boggles my mind, and I wake up sometimes thinking, no, it's all been a dream. It can't actually be true. So, no, it's definitely going mainstream. It's definitely all around us. I see it among objectivists. I see it, or people who call themselves objectivists. This movie that's going around that people are sending around. The conspiracy about all over the place, about Fauci, you saw it on the chat earlier when somebody came on, Fauci and Bill Gates. Fauci and Bill Gates, nonetheless. They've been conspiring around this virus for years. They came up with it. They 2017, they knew it was coming and they didn't warn anybody. And then they're going to make $1 gazillion, as if Bill Gates is motivated by making more gazillions of dollars. They're going to make $1 gazillion after vaccines or something. I don't know what it is, but it's a completely nuttiness, detached from reality. And again, it's desperation of people to find a simple explanation. It has to be simple because they can only handle simplicity. A simple explanation for the complexities of the world. The world is complex. The idea that ideas drive history is complex. It's hard. It's not easy to follow. It's much easier to believe a cabal of Jewish bankers are pulling the strings and manipulating the world and driving us all nuts. It's much easier to believe that Bill Gates, who has, oh my God, I don't know, tens of billions of dollars, is actually behind all the problems of the world and is about to make gazillions of more dollars in forcing vaccination down our throat, which will probably kill half the world's population, because that's what Bill Gates has always wanted, to kill tens of millions of people. It's much easier, I guess, to believe that than to believe the complexity of the world and that ideas over generations, over long decades, over millennium even, drive history, drive action, drive politics. But that's where we are today. And you know, I come from the Middle East. I was born in the Middle East. And Arab cultures of the Middle East are filled with conspiracy theory. Everything's a conspiracy theory. Because they have never elevated that culture up to a conceptual level of ideas, of cause and effect, of looking at history, of looking at trends. I mean, they reached that when they followed Aristotle in the 8th to 12th century. But since then, it's a concrete-bound, unthinking culture. And oh my God, over the last 5 years, I'd say, America feels like the Middle East. It feels like that culture. And to me, it's shocking, because I'm an immigrant to this country. I never thought America could get this bad. And in this sense, in this perceptual level mentality, in this unthinking, ignorance of science, ignorance of history, ignorance of ideas, ignorance of the way culture shapes politics and the way philosophy shapes culture. I thought America was better than that. But it's not, because every time I open Facebook, I see the conspiracy theories all over the place. All over the place. And they get nuttier and nuttier every year. And a crisis like 9/11, like the coronavirus, just brings them out in spades. Now, I guess I really started noticing them after 9/11. But they really blew up over the last, really since Obama was elected, and particularly really become mainstream with Trump. And now the whole shows, like, Alex Jones dedicated to this, and he's hailed as some hero for standing up to truth, I guess. If someone buys all the land around my existing property and demands a fee to cross it, what is the market solution to that? Is that an imposition of my property rights that laws need to correct for? It is, and laws have corrected for that. And if you look at common law going back 1,000 years, I don't know if 1,000 years, but hundreds of years, there are provisions around access to your property. And if somebody does surround your property, there has to be some provision of access to it. I mean, it's even more complicated if, let's say, 5 different owners surround your property. Now, who should provide you with access? So it gets complex, but this has been dealt with in common law. This isn't something new, and it's within the context of property rights that it has to be settled, and there is such a thing as a right to access. And so it's not, again, settled law, and you can look it up. When should you not accept an apology? Well, there are lots of situations. One, when you think it's insincere. 2, when the sin against you, when what was done to you is so horrific, so awful, so evil, so disgusting, that no apology doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. Somebody kills your child. Somebody murders your child. What does it mean to forgive them or to accept their apology. Screw you. I'm in a swearing mood today. I don't know what happened. I almost said the F word. No, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to accept your apology. I'm not going to forgive you. It's unforgivable. Certain acts are unforgivable. Murder is unforgivable. Certain lies are unforgivable. Certain actions, certain betrayals are unforgivable. There are definitely certain people who've done certain things to me that are unforgivable. I will not forgive them. I don't care what they say, what they do. I don't care how long they live. And it's not that important to me to forgive them. What they did is their problem, not mine. Why should I forgive them? So, there's lots of areas. So the two areas are, one, when it's not sincere. Two, when the offense is so horrible, you can't forgive it. And, I'm not, it doesn't mean you should, I'm not saying you should never accept an apology. There are often things that people do that are forgivable, that are not that, not that horrific or not that bad, and they say they're sorry and they apologize for it, and it's an honest apology, and that's fine. But then they're on warning that they can't do it again. Well, let's say somebody does that. Somebody does something, they lie to you, or they deceive you in some way, but it wasn't a big deal, and there's some explanation that could be interpreted as wasn't purposeful, and you forgive them, and then they do it again. Well, then it's unforgivable. Then it's done. Then you'll never accept their apology again. So repeat offenders don't get to apologize. All right. There are, by the way, let's hold the super chat questions. I'm being overrun now, and it's now this is a long show. It used to be a short show. There are bots in the YouTube comments that are hacking channels. Do not reply, subscribe to their channels. Look for comments like "Let's be friends." Do not engage with them in any way. Yeah, I've seen the "Do not let's be friends." Thanks for warning me. I haven't done anything because somebody writing me on YouTube, "Let's be friends," just sounds weird. I generally avoid things that sound weird. Right? Do many objectivists have self-esteem problems because they find objectivism when they are going through depression and searching for answers in this unthinking nihilist culture? Yeah, I think most of us, certainly when we start out, have self-esteem problems. Some of us more than others. It depends how we come to objectivism, where we come from. And remember, your self-esteem is often determined in your childhood and often determined while you're growing up. And it takes real work to improve it, to get it back on track. And objectivism gives you the tools to do that, but it doesn't guarantee instant success. Having the right ideas does not give you self-esteem. It's achieving stuff and recognizing that achievement in a rational, healthy way that gives you self-esteem. And that requires you to be connected, introspective, connected to your emotions properly, have the right attitude towards your own life, take the virtues seriously and integrate them. And for some people, that's going to require real psychological work. And I encourage people to get psychological help from somebody like Gina Gorlin, who I've had on the show, to really work on self-esteem, because it requires work and focus and energy. And if you come to objectivism with low self-esteem and you're not managing to gain it by yourself, then there's no shame. I mean, it's immoral not to seek the help. You live once. You have one shot at happiness, which requires self-esteem. And if you can't quite make it without getting help from a psychologist, or if a psychologist can give you a shortcut so you can get there faster, what are you waiting for? There's not a second to be lost. Go out there and get the help you need. Jason Fisher writes, you should not accept an apology when somebody is A, not trying to apologize, or no, won't even acknowledge what the bleep happened. I agree with that completely. Or B, they won't stop the behavior like Mel Gibson. Absolutely. So those are two criteria. And 3, if their behavior was so bad that it's not forgivable. So I agree with both of those. So the first is like my first one, where they don't really mean it. And second, when they don't change. I mentioned that as well. Thank you, Jason. I agree. Do people go insane when evading reality, or is insanity only a psychological phenomenon? Physiological phenomenon? No, I don't think it's not only a physiological phenomenon. I'm not doubting that there is a physiological element, but I think most people who go insane for, if you will, I wouldn't say philosophical reasons, but cognitive reasons. Something about evading reality, something about dealing with reality and maybe being slapped in the face for doing it, or the way they're treated, or the conclusions they come about themselves because of it, or the conclusions they come out about reality. So I think some of insanity is definitely cognitive. It's definitely a consequence of thinking, a consequence of choices, a consequence of mistakes. And some is physiological. And I think very few in the field understand the differences between the two and can articulate them. And maybe nobody knows exactly when is when. But I think both. And Leonard Peikoff has gave talks, I think in the 90s about, or maybe in the 2000s, about things like how the way we teach or don't teach Johnny how to think ultimately leads to an increase in schizophrenia, an increase in other mental illnesses. So I think our educational system, it has a huge responsibility for the rise in mental illness over the last couple of decades. Is life a game in a lot of ways, at least in today's world? No, it's too serious to be a game. Life is life. Life is life. And there are principles, and you got to find your way, but it's not a game. It's not a game is outside of a game is it's just for fun. It's shallow, it's unserious, it's entertainment. Life is too serious to be a game. This is serious stuff. You only have one shot at life. You can play a game over and over again. Life is to be taken super seriously, super thoughtfully. I mean, let me say this. I wish people took life as seriously as Michael Jordan took basketball. That's what I wish. And I think almost nobody takes life as seriously as Michael Jordan took basketball. And that's the tragedy. If we all took life seriously. Yeah, Siri thinks I'm asking her about Michael Jordan. If people took life seriously, we'd live in a completely different world. If people took happiness seriously, we'd live in a completely different world. But we don't. We live in a pathetic world, miserable world, a world tilted in the way it is, where Cuomo can extend, his authoritarian rule for another 4 weeks without anybody batting an eye. We live in that world because people don't take their life seriously. Is the only way most young people own a home today through inheritance? No. I mean, I keep getting these questions where people are super ultra pessimistic about the ability of young people to make money. I mean, if you go become a programmer, you can make starting salary, I don't know, $80,000. You can ultimately be making easily $250,000, $300,000. In many places around the country, you can buy a very nice house on a salary of $300,000. You can start a business. There are many businessmen that make good money. You can do a startup in technology and become a billionaire. The idea that there is no more opportunity to make money or earn money enough to make a house is relatively easy, is absurd. I mean, I bought my first house when I was making, $65,000 a year. Now, that was a long time ago, so let's say today it would be $100,000 a year. There are lots of jobs where you can make $100,000 a year. Right? Just you need to study or work hard or develop the skills to get there. But don't give up. Give up is the worst thing possible. It's, again, not taking your life seriously, viewing it as a game. So take your life seriously. I mean, if you become a lawyer, you're going to own many houses. If you're going to go into finance, you can do great. If you go into programming, if you go technology, but But lots of other businesses and lots of other ideas and lots of other professions. Plumbers make decent amount of money and they own homes, their own home. So unless you want to be an employee in a blue collar job for the rest of your life, then maybe it'll be more difficult. But those jobs are going away anyway, so because robots are coming. So figure out something where you have an expertise, where the robots can't take it away from you. Whether you make money or not, whether you have enough money to buy a home or not, is up to you. Now, the world right now is not making it easier for you. It's making it harder for you. But it's still up to you. Still up to you. You'll see lots of your classmates making money, even though they don't have an inheritance. Don't make it be them. Make it be you. It troubles me that you guys, some of you guys are this defeatist. Live your life. You've got only one. Go out there. Make the most of it. Find a career. Pursue it with passion. Pursue it with energy. You know, if you want to buy a house, make sure that you make enough money to buy a house. Find a profession where you can make money and have fun and enjoy yourself. When a foreign government breaks into a U.S. company's system to steal technology or spy, what is the right way to respond? Short of war with countries like China, is there any known way to solve this? The United States should, retaliate. So, for example, if we figure out who did this, right? If it's a foreign government, then there are all kinds of things you can do, but you can't be a wishy-washy government. So let's say we had a government, a real objectivist government, let's say I was president, and not just a dictator. I was president because you guys elected me president. You guys believed in me. And we had no embassy in China because I pulled the embassy from China because it's an authoritarian regime. We had an embassy in Taiwan. But, trade is up to you. You get to decide who you want to trade with. And let's say people were trading with China and so on. And China breaks into a company's thing. Yeah, I would deploy the U.S. Navy to the Chinese shore. And I would tell China, from now on, breaking into a U.S. company system is equivalent to an act of war. We don't want to go to war with you, China. And we will deploy other mechanisms, like we will crash every computer that you have in the entire country if you continue to do this. We will use cyber to crush you and to destroy you if you continue doing this. Now, assuming it was the government who did it, let's take, if it was a Chinese company. Well, if it's a Chinese company, it's easy. Then you boycott that company. That company is not allowed to trade in the United States. It's a criminal country. And any assets that they might have in the United States would be confiscated. Again, you'd have to go through a process. You'd have to go through there has to be some mechanism where you prove all this stuff. But yeah, you have to be tough. But you can't be tough if you have an embassy in China. You can't be tough if you're negotiating a trade deal. You can't be tough if, I don't know, you're funding some of their virus labs. Right? You have to be definitive. Stealing is unacceptable. And if a government steals from an American citizen in the United States, that is a violation of our sovereignty, that is a violation of our country, and it is an act of war. But you can't do that today. Trump can't declare war on China today. I mean, China would laugh at him. It would deteriorate into nuclear confrontation. It would be nuts. So you have to do it right, and you have to do it in the right steps. And the first step is, of course, is for the U.S. president to declare China an illegitimate and immoral regime. And then diplomatically withdraw from China. But not just with China. You'd have to do the same with Saudi Arabia, and the same with half the countries of the world. The United States should only have embassies in basically free countries. But who's going to do that? That's like science fiction. That's like end the Fed, right? I want to privatize I want to have private banking, no Fed, no currency, the government has no involvement in currency. I mean, that's what I believe. That's what I support. But that's not what's going to happen tomorrow. And foreign policy is the same way. You can't just flip your fingers and make it happen. There has to be a process. And you can't expect this government to act in ways that only a rational government can act after it's declared and acted in particular ways to separate itself and to identify its moral premises. All right, last question. Cuomo passed an executive order requiring everyone to wear a face mask when leaving their homes. Should I not comply even though I get yelled at by neighbors? I don't think whether the neighbors yell at you or not should be whether you comply or not. You should comply based on your values. Do you think a mask protects you? Do you think a mask protects your neighbors? If the answer is yes, then you should probably wear a mask because it's probably the rational thing to do. You want to be protected and you want to protect your neighbors. You don't want to be the cause of them getting a disease. But let's say you've tested negative on an antibody test. You haven't had, or you tested recently on a regular test. So you don't have the disease. Or you tested positive antibody test and you can't get the disease. So you can't give it to your neighbors. Then of course you shouldn't wear a mask. Or let's say, as Ramesh Adalja has argued, that masks are not good. That masks actually increase your risk because you're fidgeting with them all the time. Then don't wear a mask. You have to rationally assess the value of the mask to your life. Not based on the neighbors, not based on Cuomo, but based on your life. And if you think a mask is good for you in your life, then you should wear it. You know, somebody here says they're living in China, and they always wear a mask. Yeah, I mean, if you live in China, Chinese are convinced that wearing a mask helps. And if you're convinced of that, then it makes sense to wear a mask. Masks can filter something as small as a virus. This is again, some of the nonsense that you read online. So what you hear online is that the virus is so small that it would go right through a mask, and that's true. That's absolutely true. But the virus is not floating out there by itself. The virus is surrounded by a droplet typically of fat or water. So it has volume. The virus itself is inside the water droplet. It's the droplet that has to penetrate your mask, not the virus. And the droplet is too big to penetrate your mask. It's not true that viruses are just floating out there. That's not how it works. Right? There is a bigger particle involved. One of the reasons humid weather and heat reduce contagion, we think, is because these droplets, when you sneeze or cough or when you speak and there's droplets in the air from you, in a humid environment, water latches onto them. They become heavier, they drop to the ground faster. So humid climates cause these droplets to fall, and therefore it's harder to transmit from person to person. This is why, anyway, this is the science as far as I know, and I try to stick to science, not to conspiracy theories. So even when it comes to the size of a virus and masks, you have to be careful. You have to do a little bit of research, and you can't believe everything you read on the web. Indeed, most of the stuff you read on the web is wrong. And it's definitely safer outside. So Alex is absolutely right. Alex Epstein is definitely right about it's safe outside. It's when you're in confined space, when there's no air circulation, when surfaces are surfaces you touch all the time, and somebody else is there. That's when you're more likely to get it. When you're outside and you're not touching surfaces because you're walking or you're jogging or you're walking by the beach or you're sitting at the beach, and it's just in the air and there's a breeze and it's humid and all this stuff, it's just so much safer to be outside than inside. But I mean, assuming you're inside with other people, if you're all by yourself, then you're not going to get anything from anybody else. All right. That was longer than I expected. Whew, an hour and a half in the end. Sorry about the technical difficulties, But we got 2 shows out of it. One about Michael Jordan and one just a Q&A. Good questions. Thank you for the questions. And we'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Time with Amy. So you're on an Amy show tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll see you then. And where else? And then we'll do more shows during the week. We'll figure it out exactly when. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. I will see you